There's a lot of wide open space in the southwestern United States, and much of it is desolate scrub and unproductive wilderness. It just stretches as far as the eye can see. A lot of people use that kind of imagery when talking about their faith. They talk about doubts that have left them feeling like they're wandering alone in the middle of nowhere. They say their spiritual life is barren and unproductive. Have you ever felt that way? Ever feel like your doubts are draining away the vitality of your faith? Well, if you have, that's all right. You're not alone. As we're going to discover in this session, you can harbor doubts and still be a Christian. And you don't have to feel abandoned and alone in the middle of a desolate spiritual landscape.
I think that some people, I'm not sure if it's a spiritual gift or if it's just wiring, but some people just seem to find faith easy. It comes naturally. I've never been like that. My propensity is toward doubt. Doubt of God, doubt of Bible, doubt of Jesus. And not because of anything God or Jesus has done, but it's the way I'm wired. It's like some people are born with certain gifts and others without. I don't have the gift of faith. As a child, my mind was asking questions that I wasn't getting good answers for. But I think more as a child, I defined faith in ways that are unrealistic to expect. As a wonderful, ongoing, thrilling experience that never ends, that was part of it. Also, I defined God in ways that make him unbelievable. Somehow I was really a legalist, and I thought that I could never be acceptable to God without perfect understanding, correctness, and perfect behavior, performance. And so part of it was a distorted view of God and bad theology, and then a distorted view of what faith really is. Then later, as I went to university and as I began reading, the kinds of things that challenged the faith as I understood it, and even challenged faith, period, and that congenital doubt was fed with, someone would call it an informed unbelief or questions that were bigger. And at first, my previous view of the Bible wouldn't allow for that latitude. I just didn't understand the background. And so, if you pulled one brick out of my little brick house, the whole thing came down. And so those kinds of doubts, as I had to reorient my approach to the backgrounds of the Bible. And then larger doubts, the big ones that plague, I'm sure, every thoughtful believer, and that is the problem of evil. Why does a loving God, who is all-powerful and all-knowing, not do anything about some of the horrible things going on in his world? Is he not loving? Or doesn't he know? Or is he powerless? Or does he exist, And those kinds of things I would wrestle with. See, at each level, I would come to new understandings of the faith and break some of the old stuff, but I would find new levels of doubt. Can I be a Christian and still have doubts about my faith? If you cannot, I am not a Christian. Now, across the years, the more I have experienced life and faith, I began realizing that thoughtful people are going to keep on encountering challenges to the faith, many of which, after 50-some years of ministry and I don't know how many academic degrees and a lot of prayer and listening to a lot of wise and godly people, I haven't found answers for. And I think somewhere back there, I began realizing two things. One is that you will never have all the answers, that you cannot totally prove the faith, and that the most brilliant of learned of people will go to their graves with huge questions that are unanswered. And secondly, that doubt can be a healthy part of faith, that doubt and faith are not opposites. And my favorite passage that helped me see that was the man in the Gospel of Mark that comes to Jesus with a son who is demon-possessed, and sometimes the father says to Jesus he falls in the fire, sometimes he falls in the water, and if you can do anything. And Jesus says, if. All things are possible to him that believes. In other words, he's saying the power of God is unlimited. But the man's answer just tears at my heart still. He said, well, Lord, I believe, but would you help me with my unbelief? And Jesus didn't say, no, you don't believe. Time out. If you got doubts, you don't believe. He responded to the man as a believer, an honest person on his journey into the heart of God. And I thought, ooh, my doubts don't mean I'm not a believer. They may be a normal part of at least the faith of some people. To discover the truth was like being liberated from a prison, because I had defined faith as having no doubts. And so I thought, I'm not abnormal, I'm not sick, I'm not bad, I'm not an unbeliever. I've got a mustard seed, and I'm going to live my life asking that he will help me with my unbelief. And he has. He has not taken away every doubt. He has not answered every question. But there is a web of faith woven around my heart across the years of following him, where I've discovered on levels I couldn't explain to anybody and levels I can explain that he has validated himself to be true. I think that God would have a whole lot greater sense of approval of someone being honest about their doubts than to pretend they don't have them and try to sweep them under the rug. With God, integrity is of utmost importance. There may be some people whose faith isn't honeycombed with doubt, but I think the majority of believers at times have huge doubts and never totally escape some of those insoluble questions. But that doesn't mean they're non-believers. I believe, but help me with my unbelief. It's in there too. I certainly wouldn't encourage anybody to sweep their doubts under the rug or to just ignore those questions, pretend they don't exist, or pretend they don't matter. There's an intellectual dishonesty in that, and I don't think that God honors dishonesty. He hasn't given us brains so that we'll have to have them be lobotomized in order to be a believer. Park your brains at the church door. It's not that we should sweep them under the rug. We need to deal with them, confront the heavy ideas. The Christian faith has enough to it that it will always be challenging the most brilliant intellect, and we will never amass all of the understanding or untangle all of the mysteries. Doesn't mean we shouldn't move into them for as long as we live to search deeper into the depths of God and to understand all we can. But the Christian faith is not about knowing everything there is to know about God. And it's not about having answers for every question that somebody wants to raise. We want so much to be in control. And so we want a God that can be explained and that we can defend from our rational perspective, or our intelligence is at stake. And it's almost like God is saying, no, the secret things belong to God. The things revealed belong to you. I just want you to trust me. And we have people who are not willing to believe in a God unless he makes sense to them. He's not a God then. He is an extension of our own imaginations. But God is so much bigger. And how rich it is to be able to say, wow, our world is so beautifully fascinating and interesting. It has all these marvelous creative things. I'll never know the depth of how all of it works. But even exploring any facet of it is a lifetime experience of joyful growth. And my internal universe is the same way. The mind of God is infinitely more. That it's a rich, rich, inexhaustible journey. What we need to do is to hang on to Him no matter what. And He's going to take us through some scary places, and we will not know what's going on. But if we let go of Him, we're in real big trouble. So let's just hang on to Him. And I remember there's an old song we used to sing, "My Lord knows the way through the wilderness. All I have to do is follow." And I thought, that kind of sums up my faith in the middle of doubts. Even the trip through the wilderness is an adventure, if He's there. If not, it's a disaster.
These are called nodding donkeys or grasshopper pumps. You can easily see why. They're scattered all over Texas and Oklahoma and other parts of the country. Technically, they're called pump jacks. And with each stroke, they can draw up from the ground as much as 40 liters of emulsion, which is a mixture of crude oil and water. So isn't that interesting that on the surface, it's pretty desolate. I mean, there's some gravel and some mud and some dirt and some scrub, and yet underneath the ground, a short distance away, is a commodity that's highly valuable. It's a lot like our spiritual life. You know, sometimes we feel like we're in a desolate area. Sometimes we feel like we're kind of alone and abandoned, and yet, if we drill down, often we can find a treasure beneath. God can give us the resources to carry on. Think about the children of Israel. They wandered for 40 years in the desert, and yet God provided them food and water, and He guided them as well. And so I hope that you will dig beneath the surface of your doubts, and you will find the treasure that lies there. Does that mean there are no questions, there are no issues or objections? No. In fact, next session, we're going to talk about the biggest objection to Christianity of all. I'll look forward to seeing you then. When evil strikes, sometimes the pain